I tapped at the thermal sensor panel, trying to make sense of the readings. The numbers looked off, showing a 3-degree temperature spike in the eastern quadrant that didn't match any of our models. I adjusted the calibration knob and watched the digital readout flicker. "Come on," I muttered, tapping the glass face of the monitor. The satellite phone's harsh ring cut through the quiet hum of the observatory's equipment. I grabbed it from the wall mount, the coiled cord stretching as I pressed it to my ear. "Hayes here." "Dr. Hayes, this is Patricia Williams from NASA." Her voice was clipped, professional, with an urgency that made me straighten up. "We need to discuss something of immediate concern." I frowned, glancing at the thermal readings again. "What's going on?" "Our deep space monitoring network has detected an unidentified object on approach to Earth." She paused, letting that sink in. "It entered our solar system approximately 6 hours ago." "An asteroid?" I asked, already calculating the odds of impact. We tracked near-Earth objects regularly, but NASA rarely called about them unless... "No," she cut in. "This object is slowing down." I stopped breathing for a second. Slowing down? That's not possible unless it's under some form of propulsion or control, yes. Her voice remained steady, but I caught the tension underneath. "The object has been decelerating steadily since it passed Mars' orbit. Current trajectory calculations put it on a path toward the Antarctic continent." I looked out the window at the endless white landscape surrounding our remote station. "You're saying it's coming here, near us?" "Your observatory is the closest scientific installation to the projected impact zone. We need eyes on the ground when it lands." "When, not if," I noted. "Correct. At its current rate of deceleration, we expect it to attempt some form of landing rather than simply crash, but we can't be certain." I ran a hand through my hair. "What exactly are we talking about here, Patricia? What is this thing?" She hesitated. "We don't know. Its composition doesn't match any known spacecraft or satellite. Its size is approximately 20 meters in diameter. And Dr. Hayes?" She paused again. "It's changing shape." "Jesus," I whispered. "How long do we have?" "Less than an hour. I need you to prepare your team for observation protocols. Document everything, but maintain a safe distance. Military support is being mobilized, but given your location, they won't arrive for at least 18 hours. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Understood. I'll gather the team." "One more thing, Dr. Hayes. If this object contains anything, do not approach it without proper protection. We don't know what we're dealing with." "Got it. I'll call back when we have eyes on it." I hung up and stood there for a moment, trying to process what I'd just heard. Then I snapped into action, hitting the station-wide intercom button. "All personnel to the main lab immediately. This is not a drill." 5 minutes later, Marcus, Rebecca, and Thomas had gathered around the central table in our main lab. Their faces showed varying degrees of concern and curiosity. "What's going on, John?" Rebecca asked, her pale blue eyes fixed on me intently. She had her atmospheric monitoring tablet clutched against her chest, never far from her data. I took a deep breath. "I just got off the phone with NASA. They've detected an unidentified object on approach to Earth. It's slowing down as it enters our atmosphere, and they project it will land somewhere in our vicinity within the hour." Thomas's eyebrows shot up. "Slowing down? You mean..." "Yes," I said. "It's not natural, and it's changing shape, according to NASA." Marcus's face went completely white. "Oh my God. Oh my God." His hands started to shake. "It's happening. It's actually happening." "Marcus, stay calm," I said, keeping my voice level. "We need to prepare observation equipment and..." "Calm?" Marcus's voice rose several octaves. "You want me to be calm when aliens are about to land on our doorstep?" He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging in. "Don't you understand what this means? First contact, or invasion. This changes everything, all of human history." Rebecca stepped forward. "Marcus, we don't know what it is yet. Let's not jump to..." "No!" Marcus backed away from us, his eyes wild. They're coming for us. This is it, the end of humanity as we know it. Thomas moved toward him slowly. Dr. Elias, please, we need to approach this scientifically. Science? Marcus laughed, a high, unnatural sound. Science won't save us when they start harvesting us. I need to see it. I need to know what we're facing. Before I could react, Marcus bolted for the door, slamming his hand on the emergency release. Marcus, stop! I yelled, lunging after him. The door hissed open, and Marcus disappeared into the corridor. I sprinted after him, hearing Rebecca and Thomas shouting behind me. By the time I reached the main airlock, Marcus was already pulling on his thermal gear, movements frantic and clumsy. Marcus, don't do this, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We need to stay together and follow protocols. There are no protocols for this, John. He yanked on his hood, not bothering to secure it properly. Someone needs to make contact. I grabbed his arm. The military is on the way. We just need to observe from a safe distance and wait for backup. He wrenched free of my grip. 18 hours? It'll be too late by then. He hit the outer airlock release. At least take a radio, I shouted, but he was already pushing through the door. I cursed, grabbing my own gear. I pulled on my thermal jacket and pants as quickly as I could, securing my hood and grabbing a handheld radio. By the time I got through the airlock, Marcus was already 100 yards out, running awkwardly through the snow toward the horizon. The Antarctic wind hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. The temperature was -40 with the wind chill, and the sky had taken on an eerie green tint that had nothing to do with aurora activity. Marcus! I yelled, my voice whipped away by the wind. I started after him, pushing through the deep snow. Marcus, come back! He was too far ahead, moving with the reckless energy of panic. I tried to catch up, but the snow dragged at my legs, slowing me down. The green tint in the sky grew brighter, casting an alien glow over the white landscape. Suddenly, a blinding flash of green light erupted from the horizon. It shot upward in a pillar that seemed to connect earth and sky, so bright I had to shield my eyes. The ground beneath me trembled, then bucked violently. A massive boom followed, not just heard, but felt, a pressure wave that slammed into me and knocked me backward into the snow. The air rushed from my lungs as I hit the ground, and for a moment, all I could do was lie there, stunned. When I managed to push myself up, my ears were ringing. The green light had faded to a steady glow on the horizon, illuminating a plume of steam and snow rising into the air. About 2 miles out, a crater had formed, its edges glowing with the same unearthly green light. I staggered to my feet, scanning the white expanse between me and the impact site. There was no sign of Marcus, no dark figure moving against the snow, no tracks continuing forward. He had simply vanished. Marcus! I shouted, my voice sounding muffled through the ringing in my ears. Marcus! Nothing but the howl of the wind answered me. I stood there for another minute, searching desperately for any sign of him, but it was useless. Either he had somehow reached the impact site, or the blast had. I couldn't finish the thought. The wind was picking up, driving ice crystals against my face. The temperature was dropping further, and I knew I couldn't stay out much longer. With one last look toward the glowing crater, I turned and made my way back to the observatory. Rebecca and Thomas were waiting anxiously by the airlock, their faces pale with worry. Where's Marcus? Rebecca asked as I stepped inside, stomping snow from my boots. I shook my head. Gone. There was a flash and an explosion. I got knocked down, and when I got up, I couldn't see him anywhere. Thomas helped me remove my outer gear. What happened out there? We saw the light from here. Something crashed, I said. There's a crater about 2 miles east, glowing green. I couldn't see any object or craft from where I was standing. Rebecca's hand went to her mouth. You think Marcus reached it? I don't know. He was running toward it when the flash happened. There's no sign of him now. I moved past them, heading for the control room. We need to lock this place down, seal all external access points, and run diagnostics on our air filtration system. Thomas nodded, immediately moving to the environmental control panel. Rebecca hesitated, looking toward the windows. What was it, John? What crashed out there? I don't know, I said, but we're going to find out, safely, following protocols. I picked up the satellite phone. First, I need to report back to NASA. I punched in the number Patricia had given me, and she answered on the first ring. Dr. Hayes, what's your status? The object has landed, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline still pumping through my system. Impact site is approximately 2 miles east of our position. There was a bright green flash and an explosion that knocked me off my feet. Any visual on the object itself? Negative, just a glowing green crater. And Patricia. I swallowed hard. We've lost Dr. Elias. He ran toward the impact site before I could stop him. He was caught in the blast or something. He's gone. There was a pause on the other end. Understood. I'm sorry about Dr. Elias. Her voice was professional, but I caught a note of genuine regret. What's your current security status? We're locking down the observatory now, running diagnostics on all systems. Good. Maintain your position and continue observations from a safe distance. The military response team has been notified of the impact. They'll reach you as soon as possible. I looked out the window at the green glow on the horizon. Patricia, what exactly are we dealing with here? She was quiet for a moment. I wish I could tell you, Dr. Hayes. Just be careful. Document everything, but protect your team. That's your priority now. Understood. I hung up and turned to find Rebecca and Thomas watching me, their faces tense with questions I couldn't answer. What now? Thomas asked quietly. I looked back toward the windows, where the green glow pulsed steadily against the Antarctic night. Now we wait and watch. I watched Rebecca from the corner of my eye as she paced back and forth in the observatory's main lab. She kept stopping to press her ear against the eastern wall, then shaking her head and resuming her circuit. This had been going on for the past hour. Rebecca, I said, looking up from the atmospheric readings I'd been monitoring. Maybe you should try to get some rest. She jumped at the sound of my voice, like she'd forgotten I was there. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she hadn't changed clothes since before Marcus disappeared. I can't sleep, she said, rubbing her temples. Not with everything. Thomas glanced up from his communication station, where he'd been trying to establish a backup link to NASA. The main satellite connection was working, but he'd been insistent on redundancies since the impact. The military response team should be here in less than 20 hours, Thomas said. We just need to hold tight until then. Rebecca nodded absently, but her attention had already drifted back to the eastern wall. She walked over and placed her palm flat against it, closing her eyes. I saved my data and walked over to her. Rebecca, what are you doing? She didn't answer right away. When she finally turned to face me, something in her expression made my skin crawl. John, she whispered, I need to tell you something, but not here. Her eyes flicked toward Thomas. I followed her into the corridor that led to the personal quarters. Once we were alone, she leaned in close. I can hear them, she said. Hear who? Voices, coming from the crash site. She gripped my arm with surprising strength. They're calling my name, John. They've been calling me for hours. I tried to keep my expression neutral. You're under enormous stress. We all are. Marcus is gone. We've got an unidentified object that crashed 2 miles from here. It's not stress, she hissed, her fingers digging deeper. I know what stress sounds like. This is different. They're saying my name over and over. Rebecca, Rebecca. Her voice took on a sing-song quality that made me want to step back. When did this start? I asked, trying to sound clinical rather than concerned. After the green flash. It was faint at first, but it's getting louder. She looked toward the eastern wall again. They need help, John. They're asking for help. I placed my hands on her shoulders. Rebecca, listen to me. You haven't slept in over 24 hours. Your mind is playing tricks. I'm not crazy. She pulled away from me. I'm telling you, something at that site is alive and it's trying to communicate. Okay. I held up my hands. Let's think about this logically. If something is trying to communicate, we should document it. We're scientists, right? Let's approach this scientifically. This seemed to calm her. She nodded slowly. Good. First, you need to eat something and rest for a bit. Then we can discuss what to do next. There's no time, she said, but her voice had lost some of its frantic edge. But I'll try to eat something. I walked her to the kitchen area and watched as she mechanically ate half a protein bar. Her eyes kept drifting toward the eastern wall. For the next 2 hours, I tried to keep her busy with mundane tasks, checking equipment readings, organizing data, but her behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would stop mid-sentence and tilt her head as if listening, then mutter something under her breath. Thomas pulled me aside while Rebecca was in the bathroom. "What's going on with her?" he asked. "Extreme stress reaction," I said, keeping my voice low. "She thinks she hears voices from the crash site." Thomas's eyes widened. "Should we sedate her?" I shook my head. "That might make things worse. I'm trying to keep her calm until the military arrives." When Rebecca returned, her face was flushed and her hands were shaking. "I need to go out there," she announced. "They're getting desperate." "Who's getting desperate?" Thomas asked. "The voices," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "They need help." Thomas shot me an alarmed look. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "no one is going outside. Not after what happened to Marcus." She walked up to me, her eyes intense. "John, please. I know you think I'm losing it, but I'm not. Something is out there, and it's calling to me specifically. If I don't go, something terrible will happen. The only terrible thing would be losing another team member," I said firmly. For the next hour, Rebecca alternated between pleading and arguing. She became more agitated, more convinced that she needed to go to the crash site. Thomas and I tried to reason with her, but it was like talking to someone in the grip of a religious experience. Finally, she broke down in tears. "Please, John, I can't stand it anymore. The voices are getting louder. They're screaming now." I looked at Thomas, who shook his head slightly. "Let me go with a radio," she begged. "I'll stay in constant contact. If anything seems wrong, I'll come straight back." I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble that had grown over the last day. The rational part of me knew this was a terrible idea, but Rebecca was coming apart at the seams, and I wasn't sure how much longer she could hold together. "If I say no, what will you do?" I asked. She looked me straight in the eye. "I'll wait until you're asleep and go anyway." I believed her. "Full protective gear," I said finally. "Radio contact every 5 minutes. Any sign of danger, you turn back immediately." Thomas looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "John, you can't be serious." "She's going to go either way," I said. "At least this way we can monitor her." Rebecca's face lit up with relief. "Thank you. Thank you." We helped her into the environmental suit, checking all the seals twice. I clipped the radio to her belt and tested the connection. 5 minutes, Rebecca. You radio in every 5 minutes or I'm coming after you." She nodded, her face already calmer behind the clear mask. "I'll be careful, I promise." Thomas and I escorted her to the airlock. Just before she stepped in, she turned to me. "I know you think I'm crazy," she said, "but when I come back, you'll understand." The airlock cycled, and she was gone. Thomas and I hurried to the monitoring station. We could track her position through the GPS in her suit, and the radio crackled with the sound of her breathing. "Heading east toward the impact site," she reported. "The voices are clearer out here." I checked my watch. "Remember, check in every 5 minutes." "Copy that." Thomas leaned close to me. "This is a mistake, John." "I know," I said. "But what choice did we have?" We watched the GPS dot that represented Rebecca move steadily eastward. 5 minutes passed. "Rebecca, check in," I said into the radio. "Still moving toward the site," she replied. "The snow is deeper than I expected. The voices, they're excited that I'm coming." I exchanged a look with Thomas. Another 5 minutes. "Rebecca, report." "I can see the glow from here," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's beautiful. The green light pulses like it's breathing." "What do you see exactly?" I asked. "The crater, the object inside. It's not what I expected." Her voice had taken on a dreamy quality. "Describe it," I pressed. "Metal, I think, but organic somehow, like it grew rather than was built." 5 more minutes passed. Her GPS showed she was getting close to the impact site. "Rebecca, check in." "I'm at the edge of the crater now." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The voices are so clear. They're saying they've been waiting for me." "Rebecca, maybe you should step back a bit." "There's movement inside the wreckage," she continued as if she hadn't heard me. "Something shifting, green liquid, flowing like it's alive." "Rebecca, I want you to turn around and come back now." My grip tightened on the radio. "It's reaching out to me," she breathed. "Oh my God, it's beautiful and terrible at the same time. I can see." A scream tore through the radio, so loud that Thomas and I both jumped. It was followed by a horrible gurgling sound, then silence. "Rebecca!" I shouted into the radio. "Rebecca, respond!" Nothing but static. "Rebecca, can you hear me?" I tried again. "Rebecca!" The GPS signal showed she wasn't moving. "Her suit sensors are still transmitting," Thomas said, pointing to the readout. "Heart rate elevated, now dropping rapidly." "Rebecca, if you can hear me, say something," I pleaded into the radio. The static continued unbroken. "We have to go after her," I said, already moving toward the equipment room. Thomas grabbed my arm. "John, wait. We don't know what happened out there." "Exactly why we need to go now. If something attacked her, it could attack us too," he argued. "We should wait for the military." I pulled my arm free. "Her heart rate is dropping. She could be bleeding out there. We can't wait." Thomas looked torn, then nodded. "Let me get my gear." We suited up quickly, checking each other's seals and grabbing extra medical supplies. I clipped a flare gun to my belt, not sure what good it would do, but wanting something that felt like protection. We wait 2 hours, I decided. Give whatever might be out there time to, I don't know, leave or settle down. Thomas nodded grimly. Those 2 hours were the longest of my life. We watched Rebecca's vital signs on the monitor, seeing her heart rate slow to a barely detectable flutter, then flatline entirely. The suit's temperature reading dropped steadily until it matched the external environment. When we finally ventured outside, the Antarctic night was pitch black except for our headlamps and the eerie green glow on the horizon. We followed Rebecca's footprints in the snow, moving as quickly as we dared. We found her body halfway to the crash site. My headlamp illuminated her first, a crumpled form in the snow, the white of her environmental suit stained dark. As we got closer, I could see the suit had been torn open in multiple places. Deep gashes cut through the protective layers and into the flesh beneath. "Oh God," Thomas whispered. I knelt beside her and gently turned her over. Her face mask was intact but fogged with condensation. When I wiped it clear, I recoiled in horror. Rebecca's face was frozen in an expression of pure terror, her mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide and staring at nothing. Across her cheeks and forehead were more cuts, deep, parallel lacerations that looked like claw marks. "What could have done this?" Thomas asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head, unable to speak. The cuts were precise, almost surgical in their placement. No Antarctic animal I knew of could make wounds like these. "We need to get her back to the facility," I said finally. Together, we wrapped her body in an emergency blanket and lifted her between us. The journey back was slow and grim, our headlamps casting long shadows across the snow. Once inside, we placed Rebecca's body in the cold storage room that served as our backup sample freezer. It was the best we could do until help arrived. I peeled off my suit, my movements mechanical. 2 colleagues dead in less than 24 hours. My mind couldn't process it. The satellite phone rang, its harsh tone cutting through the silence. I picked it up, already knowing who it would be. "Hayes here," I said, my voice hollow. "Dr. Hayes, this is Patricia Williams." Her voice was crisp and professional as always. "I need an update on your situation." I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Marcus is still missing, presumed dead, and now Rebecca is dead too. There was a pause. "What happened to Dr. Jensen?" I swallowed hard. "She went to investigate the crash site. Something attacked her. Her body was torn apart, Patricia, claw marks everywhere." Another pause. "I see. And the object itself? Have you collected any samples yet?" I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it in disbelief. "Did you hear what I said? 2 of my team are dead. Whatever crashed here killed them." "I understand this is difficult, Dr. Hayes," Patricia said, her tone unchanged. "But the mission parameters remain critical. We need samples from that spacecraft." "Spacecraft? So you know it's not just an object?" "Our analysis suggests it's of artificial origin, yes, which is why samples are vital to national security." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not sending anyone else out there. We're waiting for the military team." "Dr. Hayes," Patricia's voice hardened, "the military assistance won't arrive for another 18 hours. This cannot wait." "Why not? What's so urgent that it's worth more lives?" "That information is classified, but I can tell you that what crashed near your facility represents a potential threat that must be understood immediately." I looked across the room at Thomas, who was sitting with his head in his hands. "I've lost 2 people, Patricia. I'm not losing a third." "Dr. Hayes," she said, her voice dropping lower, "this isn't a request. The mission cannot wait. You need to collect samples from that craft." "Or what?" I challenged. "Or you'll be held responsible for obstructing a matter of national security." She paused. "I don't think you want that added to your record." I closed my eyes, feeling trapped. "This is wrong, Patricia. You know it's wrong." "What I know is that we have an unknown entity on Earth's soil. What I know is that understanding its composition could be the difference between preparation and catastrophe." Her voice softened slightly. "John, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary." I looked at Thomas again. Could I really ask him to risk his life? Could I risk mine? "I'll think about it," I said finally, "but I'm not promising anything." "You have 6 hours, Dr. Hayes. After that, other measures will be taken." The line went dead. I put the phone down and walked over to Thomas. "They want samples from the crash site," I said. He looked up at me, his face pale. "After what happened to Rebecca, they're insane." "They're scared," I corrected. "Whatever this thing is, it has them spooked enough to push us into a suicide mission." "So what do we do?" I looked toward the eastern wall, beyond which lay the green glow of the crash site and whatever killed Rebecca. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but we've got 6 hours to figure it out." I pulled the zipper of my environmental suit all the way up to my chin, double-checking the seals around my wrists and ankles. The material felt stiff and unforgiving against my skin, a necessary barrier between us and whatever waited at that crash site. Thomas stood across from me, his face pale in the harsh fluorescent light of the prep room. "You sure about this?" Thomas asked, his voice muffled as he secured his helmet. After what happened to Rebecca, I wasn't sure about anything anymore. 2 colleagues dead in less than 24 hours. The rational part of my brain screamed that we should wait for the military response team, but Patricia's ultimatum hung over me like a guillotine. "We don't have a choice," I said, picking up my sample kit. "If we don't get something from that site, Patricia will make sure our careers are over. Besides, we'll be more careful than Rebecca was." Thomas nodded, but his eyes betrayed his fear. I couldn't blame him. My own hands shook slightly as I checked our radio connection. "Testing, 1-2, I said into the helmet mic. "Receiving," Thomas confirmed, his voice crackling through the speaker in my helmet. We performed our final equipment checks, each movement deliberate and practiced. The weight of the situation pressed down on me with each passing second. 2 colleagues gone, 2 friends. "Ready?" I asked. Thomas took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." The airlock hissed as we stepped inside, the mechanism sealing us in before the outer door opened to the brutal Antarctic landscape. Wind immediately whipped against my suit, the cold so intense it seemed to penetrate even the insulated layers. Ahead of us, a soft green glow pulsed on the horizon, marking our destination. We trudged through the snow in silence, our breathing loud in the confined space of our helmets. The GPS tracker beeped steadily, guiding us toward the impact site. With each step, the green glow grew stronger, casting an unnatural light across the pristine white landscape. After 20 minutes of walking, we crested a small ridge, and I stopped short. Thomas bumped into me from behind. "Jesus," he whispered. Below us lay what was unmistakably a spacecraft, not an asteroid or meteorite, a constructed vessel. About the size of a commercial airplane, its metallic hull reflected the green light emanating from inside. Strange symbols were etched across its surface, unlike any language I'd ever seen. The craft had plowed into the ice, creating a trench several hundred feet long before coming to rest, half buried in snow. "Are you seeing this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. It's a ship," Thomas said. "An actual alien ship." We approached cautiously, circling around to where a massive crack split the hull, revealing a dark interior pulsing with that eerie green light. The symbols grew more concentrated near what appeared to be an entrance, or perhaps the crack had formed there because it was a structural weak point. "We should document this before going inside," I said, pulling out a camera from my kit. I snapped several photos of the exterior, focusing on the symbols and the hull design. Thomas moved closer to the crack, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness inside. "Hayes, you need to see this," he called. I joined him at the opening, where the crack was wide enough for a person to slip through. The beam of my flashlight revealed a corridor with smooth walls and what looked like control panels. The green light seemed to pulse from deeper within the ship. "We're going to need to go inside to collect samples," I said, securing the camera back in my kit. Thomas nodded, but as he turned toward the entrance, he suddenly staggered backward. His hand shot up to his helmet. "Thomas," I called out, stepping toward him. He didn't respond. Instead, he dropped to his knees, his body beginning to shake. I rushed to his side, grabbing his shoulders. "Thomas, what's wrong?" The convulsions grew more violent, his entire body jerking and twisting inside the environmental suit. I tried to hold him steady, but the force of his movements knocked me back. Through his faceplate, I could see his eyes rolling back in his head, his mouth open in a silent scream. Then I saw it. A thin trickle of green liquid seeping from his nostrils, the same sickly luminescence as the light from the ship. More of it bubbled from the corners of his mouth, spreading across the inside of his faceplate. "No, no, no!" I shouted, frantically trying to open his helmet to help him breathe. Before I could release the seal, Thomas went completely rigid. His back arched impossibly, then he collapsed into the snow. The green liquid stopped flowing, leaving smears across the inside of his helmet. His eyes stared upward, empty and lifeless. I checked his vital signs through the suit sensors. Flatline, just like Rebecca. "Thomas," I whispered, knowing it was useless. "Thomas, please." I sat back on my heels, the wind howling around me, alone with the dead body of my colleague and the alien craft that had now claimed 3 lives. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was the only one left. The radio in my helmet crackled to life. "Hayes, this is Patricia. I need a status update immediately." I stared at Thomas's body, trying to process what had just happened. How had the liquid gotten inside his suit? We'd checked all the seals. "Hayes, do you copy? What's happening out there?" I pressed the comm button. "Thomas is dead." A pause. What happened?" "I don't know. He started convulsing. There was some kind of green liquid coming from his mouth and nose. The same stuff we saw with Rebecca." Another pause. "And the crash site? Have you collected samples?" Her question hit me like a slap. Thomas was lying dead at my feet, and all she cared about was the samples. "No," I said. "We just arrived when Thomas—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Dr. Hayes," Patricia's voice hardened. "I understand this is difficult, but national security is at stake. You need to collect those samples and document what you find. The military team is still hours away." I looked at the crack in the hull, the green light pulsing from within. Whatever was in there had killed my entire team, and Patricia wanted me to go inside. "I'm coming back to the observatory," I said. "That is not an option, Dr. Hayes." Her tone left no room for argument. "You have a responsibility to complete this mission. Whatever killed your colleagues could pose an existential threat to humanity. We need to understand what we're dealing with." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. If I refused, Patricia would make good on her threats. If I went inside, I might end up like Thomas and the others. "I'll continue," I finally said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "But I want it on record that I'm doing this under protest." "Noted," Patricia replied, sounding satisfied. "Report back with your findings as soon as possible." The radio went silent. I looked down at Thomas one last time, arranging his body as respectfully as I could in the snow. There was nothing I could do for him now. I approached the crack in the hull, my flashlight beam trembling slightly as I aimed it inside. The entrance widened into a corridor about 7 feet tall, with smooth, metallic walls covered in more of those strange symbols. I slipped through the opening, careful not to touch any surfaces unnecessarily. The interior was cold but not freezing. Some system must still be functioning to maintain temperature. The green light grew stronger as I moved deeper into the ship, casting long shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I turned a corner and stopped short. Sprawled across the floor lay a body, but not human. The creature was tall and gray, with elongated limbs and a head too large for its thin frame. Its chest had been torn open, revealing an internal structure unlike any terrestrial anatomy I'd ever studied. As I moved forward, I found more bodies. 5, then 8, then too many to count. All of them bore similar injuries, deep claw marks across their torsos or throats, exactly like the wounds we'd found on Rebecca's body. Whatever had killed them had been vicious and thorough. Green liquid pooled throughout the corridors, collecting in small puddles that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. I carefully extracted a sample vial from my kit and collected some of the substance, making sure the container was completely sealed before storing it in my pack. As I secured the sample, a strange sensation washed over me, a pull, almost like magnetism, drawing me deeper into the ship. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just anxiety or curiosity, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. I should turn back, I thought. I had my sample. I had evidence of extraterrestrial life. That should be enough. But my feet carried me forward against my better judgment, moving toward what I somehow knew was the central chamber of the ship. The sample container in my hand grew warm, then hot, almost burning through my glove. Inside, the green liquid pressed against the walls of its container, as if trying to escape. The pull was undeniable now, guiding me forward like an invisible hand. I couldn't have turned back if I wanted to. Something was calling me, drawing me in, the same thing that had called to Rebecca before she died. I passed through a final doorway into what could only be the ship's central chamber, the green light now so bright it hurt my eyes even through the tinted visor of my helmet. The sample in my hand pulsed in rhythm with the light, guiding me forward with a force I couldn't resist. The central chamber stretched before me like a cathedral, bathed in that same sickly green light I'd been following. I stepped through the archway, my boots making wet sounds on the metal floor where the green liquid had pooled in thin rivulets. Then I saw it. The creature lay sprawled across what looked like a command platform. It must have been at least 12 feet long, covered in what looked like segmented armor plates, now cracked and split. Its body was massive, not just tall but dense, with multiple limbs splayed at unnatural angles. But what stopped me cold was how it had died. The thing had been torn apart from the inside, its armor plates pushed outward as if something had exploded from within. "Holy shit," I whispered to myself, the words fogging my faceplate. All around the corpse, the green liquid had formed intricate patterns, not random puddles, but deliberate, flowing designs that reminded me of circuit boards or neural networks. The patterns pulsed with light, brightening and dimming in a rhythm that almost felt like breathing. I took a cautious step forward, camera in one hand, sample container in the other. The vial had grown uncomfortably warm since I'd collected the specimen, but now it was actively hot against my gloved palm. "What the hell are you?" I asked, not expecting an answer as I studied the dead alien. That's when I noticed how the armor had split, not from external damage but from pressure inside. The green substance wasn't just coating the corpse, it was emerging from within it. The realization hit me with sudden clarity. This wasn't just alien technology. This was something alive, something parasitic. The crew hadn't crashed. They'd been killed from within, just like this larger creature. Their captain? Their god? I couldn't tell, but the pattern was clear. The green liquid wasn't a fuel or a coolant. It was an organism that had consumed its hosts from the inside out. "Shit!" I nearly dropped it, but managed to secure it in my sample pouch instead. A pressure built behind my eyes, like the worst headache of my life condensed into a single moment. Images flooded my mind, worlds I didn't recognize, landscapes under alien skies, all being consumed by spreading pools of green. I saw creatures of impossible shapes collapsing as the substance invaded them, their bodies becoming vessels. I saw entire ecosystems transformed, all life connected by webs of the green parasite. I staggered backward, my free hand pressing against my helmet as if I could physically push the visions away. "Get out of my head," I growled, though I knew the words were meaningless. The mental intrusion continued, showing me more worlds, more conquests. I understood with horrifying clarity what I was holding: a weapon, a biological agent designed to control any organism it touched, to spread and consume and convert. The perfect parasite, capable of adapting to any biological system it encountered. I fought against the mental pressure, focusing on my breathing, on the cold air filling my lungs through the suit's filters. The green patterns around the dead alien began to shift, the liquid pulling together, forming thicker streams on the floor. Moving toward me. "No," I said, backing away toward the entrance. "No, no, no." All around the chamber, the green substance began to flow, abandoning its patterns to converge into streams that snaked across the floor in my direction. I turned and ran, slipping on the metal floor, catching myself against a wall that felt unnaturally warm under my gloves. The corridors seemed different now, narrower, the green light more intense. Behind me, I heard a sound like rushing water. I glanced back to see a wave of green liquid flowing around the corner, picking up speed. My heart pounded as I ran, trying to remember the path back to the hull breach. Left at the junction, straight ahead past what looked like sleeping quarters, then right at the damaged section. The liquid moved faster than I could run in the bulky environmental suit, gaining on me with every second. I spotted the crack in the hull ahead, daylight visible through it. The green substance surged behind me, mere feet away now. I dove through the opening, tumbling onto the snow outside, scrambling to my feet as quickly as the suit allowed. I looked back, expecting the liquid to pour through after me, but it stopped at the breach, pulsing against some invisible barrier. Contained, at least for now, by something I didn't understand. I didn't wait to see if it would find a way through. I ran, putting as much distance between myself and the ship as possible before finally stopping to catch my breath. Thomas's body still lay where I'd left it, already being covered by the light snowfall. "I'm sorry," I said to him, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "I'm so sorry." The trek back to the observatory took longer than the journey out. My legs felt like lead, and every few minutes I checked the sample container, half expecting to find it empty. The parasite somehow escaped. But it remained sealed, the green liquid now still, as if dormant. When I finally reached the airlock, I went through decontamination protocols with obsessive thoroughness, sealing the sample in 3 separate containment units before I even considered removing my suit. Once inside, I went straight to the communications room and punched in Patricia's direct line. She answered on the second ring. "Hayes, report." "They're all dead," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Thomas, too. The object isn't a Meteor or standard spacecraft. It's a transport for a biological weapon." "Explain," she said, her tone unchanged. "The green substance is parasitic. It killed the crew from inside, and a larger creature too. Some kind of commander, I think. It's not just technology. It's alive. It can control any biological organism it touches." I took a breath. "Patricia, this thing is a threat to all life on Earth. We need a containment team, specialists in biological hazards." "We've been tracking that spacecraft for months, Hayes," she cut in, her voice suddenly cold. "Why do you think your team was chosen for this assignment?" I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic temperature. "What are you saying?" "Your team was expendable, isolated, easy to manage if things went wrong." She paused. "And they did go wrong, didn't they? But you survived, and you have a sample." My mouth went dry. "The military support isn't coming," she finished. "Not in the way you think. An extraction team will arrive within 24 hours. They'll collect you and the sample and ensure your permanent silence on this matter." The meaning was clear. I wouldn't be leaving Antarctica alive. "This is a weapon, Patricia. If it gets loose, that's not your concern anymore, Hayes. You've done your part. Now secure the sample and wait for extraction. Williams out." The line went dead, leaving me alone in the silent observatory with 3 dead colleagues and a biological weapon that an unknown government agency was planning to acquire right after they eliminated their final loose end, me. I had about 6 hours. 6 hours before a team of government operatives would arrive to collect the biological weapon I'd discovered and silence me permanently. My hands shook as I reached for the main circuit board beneath the console. I pulled it free with a sharp tug, then smashed it against the edge of the desk. Plastic cracked and electronic components scattered across the floor. I moved methodically through the room, destroying every piece of communications equipment that could be used to track my location or movements. The satellite phone, the backup radio, the GPS transponder, all of it had to go. When I finished, I stood in the center of the wreckage, breathing hard. The silence of the observatory pressed in around me. 3 of my colleagues were dead. Marcus vanished in the snow. Rebecca, her body twisted and broken in cold storage. Thomas left behind at the crash site. And soon I would join them if I didn't move quickly. I hurried to the supply room and grabbed a large backpack. Antarctica was the most hostile environment on Earth, and I needed to be prepared if I had any chance of survival. I stuffed the pack with thermal clothing, emergency rations, a first aid kit, portable stove, and as many heat packs as I could fit. I added a compass, maps of the region, and a small toolkit. Next came the hard part. I removed the sample container from its triple-sealed unit and stared at the green liquid inside. Even through the reinforced glass, I could feel its presence, a pressure against my thoughts, like something alive and aware, watching me. "You're not getting all of me," I whispered. I carefully divided the sample into 4 smaller containers. The first I sealed inside a metal box and hid behind a loose panel in the bathroom. The second went into the ceiling tiles above Rebecca's workstation. The third I buried deep in a container of chemical waste in the lab. And the fourth, the smallest amount, I kept for myself, triple sealed and tucked into an inner pocket of my thermal suit, insurance in case they caught up to me. As I zipped up my jacket, I heard it, the distant thump of helicopter rotors. "No," I whispered. "Too soon." I rushed to the window and peered outside. 2 black helicopters approached from the east, still small against the vast white landscape, but closing fast. Patricia had lied about the timeline. They weren't coming in 24 hours. They were coming now. I grabbed my pack and ran to the emergency exit at the rear of the facility. My boots pounded against the metal floor as I raced through the corridors. I could hear the helicopters growing louder with each passing second. At the emergency door, I punched in the override code and waited for the airlock to cycle. The seconds crawled by as the inner door sealed and the outer door prepared to open. Through a small window, I could see armed figures in white tactical gear jumping from the helicopters, their weapons raised as they surrounded the main entrance. The airlock light turned green. I pushed through the outer door and was immediately hit by a wall of freezing air. Without looking back, I ran toward a ridge of ice about half a mile away. The wind whipped at my face, but my thermal gear protected me from the worst of it. I didn't stop until I reached the ridge, then dropped to my stomach and crawled to the edge, looking back at the observatory. At least 8 soldiers had entered the facility. Through my binoculars, I could see more searching the perimeter. They moved with military precision, checking every potential exit. I had escaped with minutes to spare. I tucked the binoculars away and studied my map. The nearest international research station was over 60 miles away, a journey that would take days in these conditions. But I had no choice. I oriented myself using the position of the sun and started walking. For 3 days, I trekked across the Antarctic ice. During the day, I navigated by the sun, and at night, I used the stars, falling back on the astronomy training that had once seemed like just an interesting part of my scientific education. Now it was keeping me alive. The cold was relentless. Even with my thermal gear, I could feel it trying to work its way into my bones. I slept in short bursts, huddled in the lee of ice formations, always alert for the sound of helicopters. Twice I spotted search parties in the distance, small groups of figures in white sweeping methodically across the landscape. Each time I changed course, using natural features to mask my trail. The vastness of Antarctica became my ally. In a continent of ice, one man could disappear if he was careful enough. Throughout the journey, the sample remained inactive in its container, but I could feel its presence constantly, a malevolent weight pressing against my mind. Sometimes when I closed my eyes to rest, I saw flashes of alien landscapes, strange creatures consumed by green tendrils. Once, I woke up gasping, certain I had heard Rebecca's voice calling my name. "It's not real," I told myself, my breath fogging in the frigid air. "It's just trying to get to you." By the 4th day, my supplies were running dangerously low. My fingers and toes had lost feeling hours ago, and exhaustion made every step a struggle. But on the horizon, I spotted a dark shape against the white, the abandoned Norwegia research station, used seasonally by Norwegian scientists, but empty during this part of the year. I approached cautiously, watching for any signs of Patricia's team. The station looked untouched, half buried in snowdrifts. I forced the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale but warmer than outside. Solar batteries still provided minimal power to the emergency systems. I found the communications room and located the emergency beacon. It was designed to broadcast on international rescue frequencies, signals that Patricia's team would be monitoring, but also ones that legitimate research vessels and aircraft would pick up. I activated it, then sat back to wait, my hand resting on the pocket containing the sample. Hours passed. I dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every creak of the building settling in the cold. Then I heard it, the distinctive sound of a ship's horn, followed by radio chatter. I looked out the window and saw a research vessel flying the flag of New Zealand approaching the small dock area. I gathered my remaining strength and stepped outside, waving my arms. A spotlight from the ship caught me, and I heard shouts of surprise. Within minutes, A small boat was making its way toward me. "Who are you?" called a man with a thick New Zealand accent as the boat reached the shore. "What happened?" I had prepared my story carefully. "Dr. Jonathan Hayes," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Sole survivor of the American research team at Outpost 7. Equipment malfunction. Fire. My colleagues didn't make it." They helped me into the boat, wrapped me in blankets, and asked no more questions for now. As we approached the ship, I looked back at the endless white expanse of Antarctica. Somewhere out there, Patricia's team was still searching for me, and for what I carried. The sample pressed against my chest, sealed in its container. I had escaped with my life and with proof of what I had discovered. But as the ship's medical officer guided me below deck, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much longer, more dangerous journey. The science fiction novel hit the shelves on a Tuesday in July, 6 months after I'd crawled onto that New Zealand research vessel, half frozen and barely alive. I stood in the back of a small bookstore in Portland, watching as people passed by the display without a second glance. The cover showed a generic green alien silhouette against a stark Antarctic landscape. Cheesy, but the publisher had insisted it would sell better that way. "Invasion Antarctica" by J. Hayes read the sign above the modest stack of paperbacks. A chilling new voice in sci-fi horror. I picked up a copy, feeling the weight of it in my hands. 340 pages of fiction. Everything that had happened at Outpost 7, everything I'd seen in that spacecraft, everything about the green liquid, all of it wrapped in a neat package that people could read before bed and then forget about. The bookstore owner, a gray-haired woman with cat-eye glasses, walked over. "Are you enjoying the new releases?" she asked. I nodded, not making eye contact, just browsing. "That one's been getting some interesting reviews. Apparently the author used to work for NASA or something. Gives it that authentic scientific feel." I almost laughed. "I'll take it," I said, handing her the book. As she rang me up, I caught my reflection in the store window. Thinner face, hair grown out longer than I'd ever worn it before, dark circles under my eyes that never seemed to fade. Different enough that Patricia's people might walk right past me, but I still didn't linger anywhere for long. I paid in cash and left without a receipt. Back in my apartment, a small one-bedroom in a building with poor security cameras and a landlord who accepted cash payments, I placed the book on my desk next to my laptop. The apartment was sparse: a futon, a desk, a chair, and boxes I hadn't bothered to unpack. No point getting too comfortable. I'd already moved 3 times in 6 months. My hand went instinctively to my neck, feeling for the small vial that hung there on a metal chain beneath my shirt. The warmth of it pressed against my skin, a constant reminder. I'd transferred the smallest sample of the green liquid into this reinforced glass container, sealed it with industrial epoxy, and then encased it in a custom-made titanium shell with a screw cap that I'd welded shut. Probably overkill, but after what I'd seen happen to Rebecca and Thomas, I wasn't taking any chances. I pulled out the chain just enough to look at it, the dull metal cylinder no bigger than my pinky finger. Inside, barely visible through a tiny viewing window I'd left, was a drop of green liquid that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Sometimes I thought I could feel it getting warmer, especially at night when the whispers came. The whispers had started about a month after my escape. At first, I thought it was just the neighbors or sounds from the street. But then I began to recognize the pattern, the same kind of sounds Rebecca had described before she died. Not words, exactly, but something trying to form them, like listening to a conversation underwater. I tucked the vial back under my shirt and walked to the window, checking the street below for the 3rd time since I'd returned. No black SUVs, no men in suits, no one standing too long in one place. But they were looking for me. That much I knew. My laptop was open to a news article about a classified research initiative at a government facility in Nevada. The article was vague, mentioning only that it involved biological compounds of interest to national security. Reading between the lines wasn't hard. They had samples from the crash site. They were studying it, trying to understand it, trying to control it. God help us if they figured out how. I closed the laptop and lay down on the futon, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come easily. It never did anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that massive creature in the ship. Its armor split open from within. I saw Thomas convulsing as the green liquid crawled up his arm. I saw Rebecca's body, cold and still in storage. The nightmares were always the same. I was back in that cathedral-like chamber, but this time the green liquid didn't stop at the hull breach. It followed me, flowing over the snow, catching up to me no matter how fast I ran. And when it finally reached me, it didn't kill me like it had killed the others. It spoke to me, used me, made me its vessel. I woke up at 3 a.m, drenched in sweat despite the cool air coming through the open window. The whispers were louder tonight, almost like they were coming from inside my own head rather than from the vial. "You're not real," I said aloud to the empty room. "You're not getting to me." But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. The sample was supposed to be safely contained, but what if microscopic amounts were leaking through? What if it was already changing me, slowly, in ways I couldn't detect? I got up and went to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. In the mirror, my eyes looked the same. No green tint, no strange glow. Just tired, human. I'd published the book for 2 reasons. First, to get the truth out there, even if no one believed it was anything more than fiction. Second, as insurance. If Patricia's people ever found me, at least there would be a record, something that might raise questions if I suddenly disappeared. But it wasn't enough. The sample around my neck was both my greatest danger and my only protection. As long as I had it, I had leverage, proof of what happened and what the government was hiding. But keeping it close was a risk I wasn't sure I could continue taking. Back at my desk, I opened a locked drawer and pulled out a notebook. Old-fashioned paper, nothing digital that could be hacked or tracked. In it, I'd been documenting everything I could remember about the green liquid, the spacecraft, the creatures. Pages of observations, sketches, theories. If the whispers were real and not just trauma-induced hallucinations, then the liquid was somehow conscious, or at least capable of attempting communication. I added a new entry. Whispers increasing in volume and clarity. Sample appears unchanged visually, but subjective sense of warmth fluctuates. Consider alternative containment options. The next morning, I walked to a hardware store 10 blocks away. I bought a small concrete mixing kit, a metal lockbox, and several other supplies. The clerk didn't ask questions, and I paid in cash again. Back in my apartment, I mixed the concrete in my bathtub and poured it into the lockbox, leaving a small hollow in the center. I'd built a second containment vessel out of layered lead and glass, belt, and suspenders. Once the concrete set, I would transfer the sample from around my neck to this more secure container, seal it inside, and then figure out where to hide it. Somewhere remote, somewhere no one would think to look. As I worked, I kept glancing at my phone. I'd set up a news alert for anything related to Patricia Williams or unusual government projects. Nothing new today, but that didn't mean anything. They'd be careful, keeping their research off the radar. I thought about Marcus sometimes, about what might have happened to him in those moments after the green flash. Had he been consumed like the others? Or had something worse happened? I hadn't included his real name in the book, just like I'd changed all the names, including my own. A thin protection, but better than nothing. The concrete was beginning to set when my phone buzzed. Not a news alert, but a text from an unknown number. "Enjoying your new career as an author, Dr. Hayes?" My blood went cold. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. They'd found me. Somehow, they'd found me. I looked out the window, half expecting to see them already surrounding the building, but the street looked normal. That didn't mean anything, though. They would be careful, strategic. I had maybe an hour, probably less. I needed to get the sample secured and get out. The concrete wasn't fully set, but it would have to do. I carefully removed the vial from around my neck, placed it in the lead container, and sealed it before embedding it in the partially hardened concrete. I closed the lockbox, locked it, and wiped it clean of fingerprints. Then I grabbed my go bag, always packed, always ready, and the notebook with all my observations. The published book was fiction, but this notebook was the real record, the complete truth. Together with the sample, it might be enough to convince someone with the power to stop whatever Patricia was planning. As I headed for the door, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. "We should talk about your research methods, quite unorthodox." They were playing with me. I turned the phone off and slipped it into my pocket. I'd ditch it as soon as I was clear. With the lockbox under one arm and my bag over my shoulder, I took one last look at the apartment. The book sat on the desk, its garish cover catching the morning light. Invasion Antarctica. If only people knew it wasn't fiction at all. I left through the back exit, keeping my head down as I walked quickly through the alley. The weight of the lockbox reminded me of what was at stake. The sample was humanity's greatest threat and my only leverage against those who would use it. I needed to find somewhere truly secure for it, and then I needed to disappear again, more thoroughly this time. The whispers had gone quiet the moment I sealed the vial in the lead container. That was something, at least. But I knew they would return in my dreams, along with the memories of what I'd seen in that spacecraft. I turned a corner, merging into a crowd of morning commuters. Just another face in the city. For now, I had work to do. I needed to document everything I knew about the sample, create copies, establish dead drops, insurance against those who would use the green liquid to control others. And I needed to find a more permanent solution for the sample itself. The truth was out there now, disguised as fiction. But the real battle was just beginning.